Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I'm Arjun Chaudhary and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Amrish Saxena.
नमस्कार। आर्थिक खबरों के कार्यक्रम मार्केट मंत्र में आपका स्वागत है। तो रोज की तरह आज भी हम देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आप तक लाएंगे और उन पर चर्चा करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज कार्यक्रम में ऑनलाइन आमंत्रित हैं बाजार विशेषज्ञ पुनीत जैन। पुनीत जी, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है।
धन्यवाद अमरीश जी।
और पहले हेडलाइंस लेके मौजूद हैं अर्जुन चौधरी।
At the stock market, Sensex climbs to 298 points, Nifty adds 73 points. Punjab National Bank's fourth quarter net profit jumps 477% to 1,159 crore rupees, and RBI approves 87,416 crore rupees as a dividend for the last fiscal, also raises contingency risk buffer to 6% from 5.5%.
शेयर बाजारों में सेंसेक्स 298 अंक बढ़ा, निफ्टी में भी 73 अंकों की बढ़त दर्ज की गई। पंजाब नेशनल बैंक का चौथी तिमाही का शुद्ध लाभ 477% बढ़कर 1,159 करोड़ रुपए पर जा पहुंचा और रिजर्व बैंक ने पिछले वित्त वर्ष के लिए 87,416 करोड़ रुपए का लाभांश मंजूर किया। साथ ही आकस्मिक जोखिम का बफर 5.5% से बढ़ाकर 6% कर दिया। और सबसे पहले शेयर बाजार का हाल। शेयर बाजार में आज बंबई शेयर बाजार का सेंसेक्स 298 अंक यानी आधा प्रतिशत की तेजी के साथ 61,730 अंकों पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 73 अंक यानी 0.4% की बढ़त के साथ 18,203 अंकों पर बंद हुआ। व्यापक बाजार में मुंबई शेयर बाजार का मिड कैप इंडेक्स मामूली रूप से गिरावट के साथ बंद हुआ, जबकि स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स में भी 0.2% की गिरावट दिखाई दी।
At the stock markets, Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange climbed 298 points, or 0.5%, to close at 61,730 today. Nifty at the National Stock Exchange added 73 points, or 0.4%, to end at 18,203. In the broader market, the BSE Mid Cap Index ended marginally lower, and the Small Cap Index shed 0.2%. Among sectoral indices, the IT Index was the leading gainer, climbing 1.4%. The Tech Index advanced 1.2%. Realty and Services indices added 0.8% each. Banking Index rose 0.6%, and Auto and Utilities indices gained 0.5% each. But the Healthcare Index fell 0.6%, and the Consumer Durables Index shed 0.4%.
और रुपया डॉलर के मुकाबले 6 पैसे कमजोर हुआ। $1 की कीमत 82.66 दर्ज की गई। और इसके साथ ही पंजाब नेशनल बैंक का परिणाम भी जान लेते हैं। पंजाब नेशनल बैंक के कुल लाभ में पिछले वित्त वर्ष की चौथी तिमाही के दौरान 477% का उछाल दर्ज किया गया। बैंक ने इस अवधि में 1,159 करोड़ रुपए का मुनाफा कमाया। बैंक के बोर्ड ने वित्त वर्ष 2022-23 के लिए ₹2 फेस वैल्यू के प्रत्येक शेयर पर 0.65% प्रति इक्विटी शेयर के लाभांश की सिफारिश की है। इस तिमाही में पंजाब नेशनल बैंक के कुल एनपीए का अनुपात बेहतर होकर 2.72% हो गया, जबकि एक वर्ष पूर्व की तिमाही में यह 4.8% था।
And on this, we joined by our market expert, Shri Puneet Jain. Puneet, once again, a warm welcome to you on Market Mantra.
Thank you, Arjun.
Puneet, it seems there was a reversal in the market. The DIIs were the net buyers to the tune of 1,071 crore rupees, and the FIIs were the net sellers. And we also have news from Punjab National Bank. Bank Nifty went up by 217 points today. What are the reasons behind the DII buying into the market right now? And there seems to be a reversal once again in the market in terms of gains. What is next week likely to be, and what's happened today?
So, Arjun, if we really look at the markets overall in India and across the world, we find that the markets have been climbing very, very sharply lately. And many of the markets in the world, in fact, are at all-time highs right now. For example, I mean, you'll be surprised to know that Japan, the Tokyo stock market has reached a 33-year high now, which is after 1990. That the index has gone up. So generally speaking, the risk appetite in the stock market is much higher. In India, we have also seen very substantial FII buying, and also we find that lately the fund flows into mutual funds have been strong. So overall, we find that FIIs and DIIs have been buyers in this market. There has been some profit booking at higher levels, so we saw the market pull back a little bit this week. If you look at the last 3-4 days, today was of course a day when many news impacted the market sentiment. With regard to, there was a report about the Adani Group getting some sort of a positive outcome in terms of the investigation. So markets really jumped after that. But I think overall the sentiment continues to be quite robust and quite strong in the market. We see steady buying by domestic funds. Profit booking has not been very steep, and global sentiment is also positive. I think all these things combined to push the markets higher. And particularly if you see the banking indices, the bank Nifty, so to say, that has been very strong in the last few days.
It appears that the U.S. debt ceiling crisis has not affected the markets like it did in the previous 3 sessions, and the US dollar index is now inching up to 103. What does this tell us about the global sentiment?
So, Arjun, I think markets do not believe that there will be a default by USA. The markets, I think, they believe that there will be a settlement reached in time, and the US will be easily able to avoid this default. So they're not reacting to this possibility in any significant manner. Having said that, I think the dollar index that you mentioned, and it's almost above 103 now again, and it had gone down to about 100. So you can imagine that they believe that the U.S. markets and the U.S. economy will continue to be quite strong. The dollar index is doing pretty well. And the numbers that we have got lately, in terms of the GDP numbers or even the employment numbers, the labor numbers that we saw in US, they have been pretty good, and they don't seem to be heading towards a recession as of now. So I think markets are reacting to it positively.
And what is your view on the quarterly results of companies? You see that as a reason driving the FII and DII buying into the market?
So, Arjun, if you really look at the entire landscape of results which came from corporate sector in this quarter, it is a mixed bag. There are many areas, there are many sectors which have done very well. For example, banking has done very well. But initially, there was a lot of disappointment in the IT sector stocks, but then eventually they started doing well. The numbers were very good from some IT companies. But some FMCG companies have not done that well. We've seen the numbers have disappointed. Some commodity companies have not done very well. So it's a mixed bag. We had a case like Tata Motors where there was a huge surprise profit of 5,000 crores. We saw State Bank of India declaring profits of more than 15,000 crores for this quarter. So there have been some positive surprises, and there have been some disappointments. So I would say it's been a mixed bag so far in the corporate result respect.
Well, a company like Zomato, for instance, has narrowed its net loss to 188 crore rupees as its revenue has jumped 70%. New age companies, do you see them bouncing back now and narrow the gap with each quarter as time passes?
So again, if you look at the whole gamut of companies, the new age companies which came to market in the last 1.5 years, I think again the response has been somewhat selective. Some of the companies have done well, relatively speaking. They seem to be improving their bottom lines. They seem to be coming to grips with the situation in terms of cash burns. However, others have disappointed. So when it comes to Zomato, which came out with numbers today, I think market was positively surprised. They were still bracing for large losses from this company, and the company seems to be doing better. And going forward, they might be able to turn around their operations. Similarly, some other companies like Paytm and all, they also came out with positive numbers. So market was pleasantly surprised, I think. And my own sense is, Arjun, that these valuations will now stabilize. Earlier when they came to the market, valuations were sky high. Zomato, remember, was selling at 165, 170 rupees per share immediately after it was listed. And now the price is down to 60 rupees per share. So it's down by 60% from top. So I think those valuations have also come off. Market is somewhat realistic about the valuations, and I think that is what is likely to happen going forward.
We also have the central bank approving 87,416 crore rupees as the dividend. How important is this for sentiment in the PSU bank space? So we have the story on which we will read in some detail, but let's have your view on that as well.
So, Reserve banks, first of all, the distribution of dividends, so to say, by Reserve Bank to government has exceeded expectations. Government itself has estimated that they will receive about 48,000 crores in dividend form from RBI and PSU banks. So against 48,000 crores, they have already received 87,000 crores from RBI. So you can imagine that this is beyond what market has expected. But RBI in any case it cannot be compared to other PSU banks. But if I look at other PSU banks, SBI, Canara Bank, Bank of Baroda, all the big ones, they have come out with very handsome dividend payouts. So clearly, I think this space is doing extremely well. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, SBI has reported highest ever quarterly profits this quarter, showing that the PSU banks are really out of the woods, doing very well. And I think going forward, that will continue. I expect no negative surprise as far as PSU banking and PSU financials are concerned.
Well, Puneet, do stay with us online while we read the story in detail. RBI's board has approved the transfer of 87,416 crore rupees as surplus to the central government. The central bank also decided to raise a contingency risk buffer to 6% from 5.5%, the central bank said in a press release. In the last financial year, RBI transferred 30,307 crore rupees to the government. The budget had estimated receipts of 48,000 crore rupees in this financial year by way of total dividends from the public sector banks and the RBI. In a press release, the RBI says the board in its meeting reviewed the global and domestic economic situation and associated challenges, including the impact of current global geopolitical developments. Shakti Kanta Das led board discussed the working of the Reserve Bank during the year April 2022 to March 2023 and approved the annual report and accounts of the Reserve Bank for the accounting year 2022 to 23. Puneet, are we looking at income from Sinaraj and their shareholding in PSU banks?
That is of course part of the income, but RBI has income from many sources, primarily from three sources. One is, of course, its operations in the currency market, in terms of foreign currency market. So they hold overseas government bonds, they hold US treasuries, they hold deposits in other foreign banks. So all that is foreign currency related, plus the interventions in the foreign market. I believe that Reserve Bank of India made a lot of profit in the last year from the intervention in the rupee dollar market. So foreign currency earnings is one. Secondly, they make money from lending to domestic banks through the treasury operations, through the open market operations when they buy and sell treasury bonds. So that is the second source of income. And third, like you mentioned, is from printing of notes, from other activities, the general operations that they have. So RBI operates in all these fields, makes a handsome profit. And in fact, the earnings have exceeded expectations. At the same time, RBI has gone ahead and increased the risk buffer. They've chosen to retain some money to increase their cushion in terms of giving them power to be able to bring monetary and fiscal stability to the economy. So I think overall RBI's performance has been remarkable, and all these reasons have contributed to that good performance.
Well, seeing the performance of PSU banks, you mentioned about the quarterly performances of State Bank of India, Canara Bank as the two leading PSU banks. What is the status on disinvestment if these banks are profitable, would it make sense to disinvest? And if there is disinvestment, what is the next step?
So, Arjun, in fact, from around 29 public sector banks that India had a few years back, they are now down to 13 through a process of mergers and restructuring of banks. So, and while we have been talking about disinvesting these banks, earlier, of course, they were loss-making and government was under pressure to disinvest. Now, the truth is that all PSU banks are making a lot of money. They're making good profits. They're expanding credit. So they're in very good financial health. And there is no pressure on the government to disinvest or sell these banks. They might still do it because in any case, the government doesn't want to hold or to own more than 4 or 5 large banks. And beyond that, they want private sector to participate. So going forward, although government has said that they will form another panel to look at banks which can be disinvested, in my opinion, we will not see any major disinvestment of PSU banks, at least for next 2-3 years. At the most, we will see IDBI disinvestment maybe next year. But while this is something that government wants to do, I don't think we will see disinvestment of PSU banks anytime soon.
We saw the contagion effect of U.S. banking on FII activity, especially in India. But that seems to have worn off. How stable is the banking system in the U.S. and has that improved sentiment now?
So, Arjun, the banking system in U.S. is very different from the banking system in India. In fact, almost entire banking system in U.S., first of all, is privately owned. So, literally, except a couple of banks which are mostly mortgage lending, we don't have government-owned banks in America. And secondly, in America, you have a few large banks, but you have a very large number of small banks, regional banks. In fact, if you see in America, it is a regional small banks, the local banks, which dominate banking. And you have these big global banks like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, Citibank, very few handful of banks which are large banks which operate on global scale. So, but in India, that is not true. We don't have many banks in India. We have very few banks. Almost 70 to 80% of banking is done through government-owned banks, which are very safe. And therefore, we didn't see any contagion effect because government banks are not going to default in any case. So depositors feel safe there. So in India, we did not have any panic as far as banking is concerned. But in USA, we saw 2-3 very large banks, private sector banks. They were almost going bankrupt when they were merged with larger banks. So and even in Europe, Credit Suisse was merged with UBS. So you can see that in private sector banking, where these banks exist, there was a threat, I would say. Now it is not there any longer. But in India, the banking is very different, dominated by very large banks, mostly government-owned. And even in private sector, the banks which exist are very large. They're dominated. So I don't see any panic as far as banking in India is concerned. It is very robust, very strong.
और चलते हैं एशिया के बाजारों का हाल जान लेते हैं। विश्व की दूसरी सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था में रिकवरी को लेकर जारी चिंता के बीच एशिया के बाजारों में मिला जुला रुख रहा। जापान में टोक्यो शेयर बाजार का निकेई 0.8%, दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी इंडेक्स 0.9% और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेस टाइम्स इंडेक्स 0.5% बढ़ा। लेकिन चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स 0.4% और हांगकांग शेयर बाजार का हैंग सेंग इंडेक्स 1.4% गिरा। यूरोप में दिन के कारोबार के दौरान लंदन का फुट्सी 0.5% बढ़ा, फ्रांस के कैक में 0.7% और जर्मनी के डेक्स में 0.6% की बढ़त दर्ज की गई। पुनीत, एशिया के बाजारों में जैसा हमने देखा कि बहुत ही मिक्स्ड रुख रहा, तो आप इन बाजारों की प्रदर्शन के बारे में कोई टिप्पणी करना चाहेंगे?
देखिए अमरीश, जैसे मैंने पहले जिक्र किया था, आपने अमेरिका टोक्यो शेयर बाजार का जिक्र किया। 1990 के बाद आज के दिन वो अपने सबसे ऊंचे स्तर पर पहुंचा है। जी 33 इयर्स का हाई आज टोक्यो ने बनाया। इससे आप अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं कि जापानीज इकोनॉमी कितना कॉन्फिडेंस अब बढ़ रहा है। जो ज्यादातर बाजार जो एशिया में हमने गिरावट देखी वो चाइना के जो से रिलेटेड बाजार हैं, हांगकांग में या शंघाई में, वहां हमने कमजोरी देखी है। वहां पर हम सेलिंग भी देख रहे हैं FIS के द्वारा। मुझे लगता है ये जो ग्लोबल ट्रेंड है कि ऑफ मूविंग अवे फ्रॉम चाइना, हम मार्केट्स में देख रहे हैं, इसी का असर एशियाई बाजारों में देख रहे हैं।
Let's have a look at the US markets now. On Wall Street, key indices ended higher yesterday on mounting optimism that a US debt ceiling deal could be reached within days, with discount retailer Walmart providing additional support after an upbeat annual sales forecast. Walmart gained 1.3% after the retail giant reported better than expected first quarter earnings and boosted its 2023 sales and profit outlook. The benchmark S&P 500 index rebounded from early declines, news that top U.S. congressional Republican Kevin McCarthy had said a deal to raise or suspend the debt ceiling could potentially be reached in time to hold a House vote next week. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 115 points, 0.3% to end at 33,536. The S&P 500 gained 39 points, 0.9% to close at 4,198. And the Nasdaq Composite Index added 188 points, 1.5% to 12,688. Meanwhile, data overnight showed fewer than expected Americans filed initial jobless claims last week, lowering probability that the Fed Reserve will cut interest rates before a year end. Puneet, this U.S. debt ceiling that is expected to be raised is subject to a vote in their Congress. Isn't that a formality? But how do they expect to reduce that deficit? $32 trillion, they're also giving amnesty for student debt loans, for instance, apart from the subsidies they provided during COVID. What is the U.S. game plan right now in terms of ensuring that the debt actually goes down and does not go up further?
So, Arjun, I agree with you that first of all, that this whole debt ceiling drama is a mere formality. We all know that U.S. is not going to default. The U.S. securities will always be, AAA in a sense. So I think it's more of a political posturing, and also does not seem to be taken seriously now by the markets. However, the issue of overall debt that the U.S. has, that is of course a huge question. The truth is that the Biden administration has actually proposed raising taxes, cutting some expenditure, and they propose that they will cut debt by $10 trillion over the next 10 years. But I don't think it's possible, really. I think it's a lot of political talk. There seems to be no concrete movement towards cutting U.S. debt. No political party can actually do it. See, in a democracy, if you cut debt, you cut expenditure, people don't like it. I mean, it's not populist. So clearly, I think there's a lot of talk, but it's unlikely that U.S. will be able to cut its debt in any meaningful manner. I don't expect that there. Of course, the U.S. economy is capable of dealing with this public debt. Right now, they're about 100% of GDP. So they are able to service it. At lower interest rates, they can service it easily.
So you expect the global economy, central banks of nations like India continue to buy U.S. debt on the basis of them raising the debt ceiling and just allowing the Federal Reserve to lend the U.S. government, and they will then pay off the debt. Is that how it is working out?
So I think while many of the central banks in the world, they don't like to buy U.S. treasuries beyond a point, I don't think they have a choice. In fact, a lot of people have tried to diversify their reserves outside the U.S. dollar. But where do you keep it? I mean, you can either, that is the only currency which seems to have global acceptance. And to keep assets in any other currency or any other asset is not possible. Banks have tried to keep reserves in terms of gold or in terms of other assets. But that is only minuscule. I think mostly U.S. treasuries and U.S. dollar, whether you like it or not, it continues to be the only reserve currency available to the central banks right now. I think it will continue for some time.
और चलते हैं प्रधानमंत्री की जापान यात्रा के बारे में जानकारी लेते हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी G7 शिखर सम्मेलन में भाग लेने के लिए जापान के हिरोशिमा शहर पहुंच गए हैं। वे जापान के प्रधानमंत्री फुमियो किशिदा के निमंत्रण पर यह यात्रा कर रहे हैं। श्री मोदी आज सवेरे 3 देशों जापान, पापुआ न्यू गिनी और ऑस्ट्रेलिया की यात्रा पर रवाना हुए थे। G7 शिखर सम्मेलन ने अपने मौजूदा अध्यक्ष के लिए अनेक प्राथमिकताओं की पहचान की है। इनमें परमाणु निरस्त्रीकरण, आर्थिक मजबूती और सुरक्षा, क्षेत्रीय मुद्दे, जलवायु और ऊर्जा, खाद्य और स्वास्थ्य तथा विकास शामिल हैं। डिजिटलीकरण तथा विज्ञान और प्रौद्योगिकी जैसे प्रमुख प्राथमिकता वाले क्षेत्रों पर भी शिखर सम्मेलन में चर्चा की जाएगी। हिरोशिमा में शिखर सम्मेलन में भारत की सहभागिता 3 औपचारिक सत्रों में होगी। 2 सत्र कल आयोजित होंगे, जबकि तीसरा 21 मई को होगा। पहला सत्र खाद्य, स्वास्थ्य, विकास और लैंगिक समानता पर केंद्रित होगा।
In more news, the country's defense production rose more than 12% last fiscal year and crossed the 1 trillion rupee mark for the first time. The government said today as the country tries to reduce its reliance on imports from countries such as Russia. The country had been the world's largest arms importer in the past decade, and it depends on Russia for nearly half of its military supplies. But the war in Ukraine has held up the Russian spares critical for India to maintain its tank and fighter jet fleet and delayed the delivery of Russian air defense systems. The value of India's local defense production jumped to 1.07 trillion rupees in the last financial year and was expected to rise further once data from some private defense companies came in, the Ministry of Defense said in a statement. Very briefly, Puneet, tell us about defense companies in India that are taking advantage of this cut in supply from Russia, and will they now graduate to becoming publicly traded companies?
So a large number of companies like Hindustan Aeronautics, Bharat Dynamics, which make missiles, there are companies which are shipping companies, submarine companies which are making these ships, warships. I think India's performance in the defense manufacturing has been remarkable. It's a great achievement for the country and for Make in India program. I think in the next 10 years, we will see India emerge as a very strong contender in the global defense market, and very, very welcome development, really.
Let's move on to some more news, this time from the oil market. Global crude oil prices traded higher today as investors turned cautiously optimistic over the fading risk of a U.S. debt default. So Brent futures rose 69 cents to $76.55 a barrel. U.S. crude futures gained 56 cents to $72.42 a barrel. Puneet, in the context of oil imports to India, how much are we paying for Russian imports? And global oil prices appear to have come down. What are the consumption levels there?
So, Arjun, if you look at the trade data, so we don't have the numbers we are paying for Russian oil, but if you look at the trade data, we can make out that India has benefited significantly from Russian oil imports. We saw the trade deficit come down significantly thanks to Russian oil imports, and I think going forward that will continue. As far as the global oil demand is concerned, I think we have seen some moderation despite huge cut in production by OPEC Plus. We've seen prices moderate. I think that is going to be the trend. Shows that the demand is going down going forward.
और सोने का हाल भी जान लेते हैं। दिल्ली के सराफा बाजार में आज सोना 105 रुपए गिरकर 60,045 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर आ गया। दुनिया के बाजारों में कमजोर संकेतों के बीच यह गिरावट दर्ज की गई, लेकिन चांदी 255 रुपए बढ़कर 73,500 रुपए प्रति किलो पर पहुंच गई। और पुनीत, सोने की जो कीमत में जिस तरह की परिवर्तन हम देख रहे हैं, आप क्या टिप्पणी करेंगे इस पे?
अमरीश, देखिए, पिछले कुछ दिनों सोने में भारी गिरावट आई है और करीब $100 पर आउंस का फॉल आया है, क्योंकि डॉलर इंडेक्स है उसमें हमने बढ़त देखी तो सीधा उसका असर गोल्ड पर पड़ा। वहां पर काफी गिरावट आई है। मुझे लगता है गोल्ड एक नैरो रेंज में अब यहाँ ट्रेड कर रहा है $2,000 के आसपास, और वही शॉर्ट टर्म में शायद लेवल रहेगा गोल्ड का।
जी, और पुनीत जी, इस कार्यक्रम में शामिल होने और प्रमुख खबरों पर हमारे साथ चर्चा करने के लिए आपका धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद अमरीश।
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. At the stock market, Sensex climbs 298 points, Nifty adds 73 points. Punjab National Bank's fourth quarter net profit jumps 477% to 1,159 crore rupees, and RBI approves 87,416 crore rupees as dividend for the last fiscal, also raises contingency risk buffer to 6% from 5.5%. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. For now, goodbye.
Market Mantra.